Hello everyone, I'm Quizero Laogao. Today, we're going to talk about a topic we've been meaning to cover for a long time, but haven't touched on for a whole year.
A pitfall.
A really big pitfall, the Great Flood. So, the story of the Great Flood is actually connected to a lot of our videos, like the ones about the moon, the Sumerian king list, the Tower of Babel, and even giants. The Tower of Babel, for example, is related to language. I can't remember all of them, but there's also the Mars Boy, Atlantis, and so on. So, the Great Flood is actually a core topic among all the content on our channel. This event is recorded in the mythologies of cities all around the world. If the Great Flood really happened, it would mean that myths are actually history. Even up to today, whether the Great Flood actually existed is still a big debate in academic circles. There are mainly two groups arguing about it. One group is the archaeologists, and archaeologists generally believe that the Great Flood did not exist. Because, you see, there's no archaeological evidence that can prove the existence of the Great Flood. It's just too far back in time, right? Maybe it's so ancient that we just haven't dug it up yet. Now, the other group, who are at odds with the archaeologists, are the geologists. Geologists generally believe that the Great Flood did exist, because you can always find traces of these water basins in geological formations. The scale is enormous, it basically covered the whole Earth. But neither side can convince the other, so they've been trying to prove their point. Why is it that scientists aren't debating this issue? For example, physicists and mathematicians. The reason is that science can't prove history. So, in this regard, even Einstein doesn't have a say. So, when we discuss whether the Great Flood actually happened, we first need to talk about why some people don't believe in the existence of the Great Flood. Since it's mentioned in ancient legends everywhere, why don't people believe it? Actually, the disbelief in the Great Flood is something that has only emerged in recent years. It was at the end of the 18th century that a lawyer named James Hutton wrote some books about geology. In them, he mentioned a principle, saying that everything that happened on Earth in the past can be explained by things that are happening on Earth now. In other words, if something isn't happening on Earth now, then it didn't happen in the past either. Since there is no global flood happening on Earth now, then there wasn't one in the past either. So the idea that it never happened before is obviously wrong. But, strangely enough, this mistaken idea, it actually gained a lot of support, because at the end of the 18th century, people started to oppose the church. Many wanted to break away from the church and separate science from theology. So how could they separate theology from science? By denying the divine. Darwin was a descendant of this group, so he came up with the theory of evolution, basically saying that humans were not actually created by God. Instead, humans evolved from monkeys. This only intensified the conflict between the church and science. So, for us modern people, whether it's creationism or evolution, which one do you think is easier to accept?
I'm definitely not a product of evolution.
Anyway, whichever it is, I think a lot of our sharp 5-year-old viewers have already noticed one thing. There's a huge point of disagreement between these two theories. Evolution says that life appeared on Earth more than 4 billion years ago, then dinosaurs showed up 250 million years ago, then humans appeared 3.9 million years ago, and then it goes all the way up to now. But that's not how creationism sees it. According to creationism, God created the world and everything in it in just 7 days, dinosaurs, humans, everything. So, according to creationism, humans and dinosaurs should have lived in the same era. So did dinosaurs and humans actually live in the same era? Based on current archaeological fossil evidence, the answer is probably no, because dinosaurs are found in strata dating back to what we call 250 million years ago or 65 million years ago, while human fossils, if any, are from much more recent periods. So what's the key point here? It's that we determine which animals lived in which era by using the age of the strata. How do we know the age of these strata is 250 million years? It's measured using a method called radiometric dating. However, radiometric dating is actually quite inaccurate. Remember this point, because we'll come back to this issue later. The first common point is that this Great Flood was global in scope, and for humans, it was devastating. And in the end, humans just happened to survive. The second common point is, who appeared during these great floods. In the Bible, the Great Flood was initiated by God. In China, the Great Flood was patched up by Noah. Anyway, there's always some deity involved. So actually, whether in the Bible or in legends, it never specifically says that this Great Flood was worldwide. So how do we know it was global?
They already mentioned Noah's Ark and all that.
Ah, right, you brought up a very important point, which is Noah's Ark. If this Great Flood wasn't global, then there would have been no need to interrupt everything. If it was just a local event, people could have just moved away. There would have been no need to build an ark and put all the animals inside, especially not the birds. There were birds put into Noah's Ark, which means there was nowhere left on earth for them to land. And actually, the Bible describes this, saying that the water had already covered the highest points on earth. In fact, near the summit of Mount Everest in the Himalayas, they found fossilized seashells. As for this, the way geologists explain it nowadays is that due to tectonic movements, what was originally under the sea was pushed and squeezed over tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of years, until it ended up at the very top. So, the fossilized shells from tens or hundreds of millions of years ago ended up there. They ended up on top like that. But if you use the Great Flood to explain this, it actually makes things simpler, because if the water had already covered the highest mountains, then finding shells up there would be perfectly normal. So if we want to know when the Great Flood happened, we need to look at a few pieces of evidence. First, let's look at fossils. According to traditional biologists, fossils are formed when animals die and then get buried in sedimentary rock, and over thousands or even tens of thousands of years, they become fossils. Then it turns into a fossil, and this process is extremely slow. However, nowadays, more and more archaeologists and geologists believe that fossil formation might not actually be that slow. Because, for example, if an animal dies on the ground, before it gets buried and gradually turns into a fossil, it might already have been eaten or decomposed. It wouldn't just sit there waiting and waiting. It wouldn't just wait around for dust or sand to slowly cover it up and then gradually turn into a fossil. It must have been suddenly buried by something, pressed underneath, and then, with no air inside, it gradually merged with the surrounding rock and became a fossil. So the speed at which it was buried was actually very fast, definitely not slow at all. So you have to think about that. What could possibly bury a pit that's dozens of meters deep all at once? There are a few possibilities. One is that the dinosaur itself fell into mud, into a swamp or mire. Another possibility is a great flood, a massive flood that swept in mud and sand, covering the animal underneath, and it would directly become a fossil. And then there's another particularly obvious example. For example, Darwin once said that soft-bodied animals can't become fossils, that fossils can't preserve them. Take jellyfish, for instance. But in reality, that's not the case. Nowadays, jellyfish fossils have been found all over the world.
How could jellyfish become fossils?
This right here is a jellyfish fossil.
This isn't a mushroom fossil.
No, this is a jellyfish fossil. Soft-bodied animals like this, and even things like algae from over 4 billion years ago, their fossils can be preserved too. Don't you find that strange? So how exactly are fossils of these soft-tissue animals preserved? There's only one way they could have been preserved. They were rapidly buried. So, for jellyfish that live in the water, what could have buried them so quickly? It must have been something like a massive flood that suddenly covered them up. But weren't they already in the water? Yes, but a massive flood is a whole different concept. It's not like the waves or seawater we see today. It's more like a tsunami. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but a tsunami is black, filled with mud and sand. So when people are caught in a tsunami, they can't swim out, they get swept up in it and are instantly buried, turning into fossils right away. That's how fish and jellyfish end up becoming fossils. So, when we see so many fossils today, especially when it comes to so many dinosaur fossils, how could there be so many mud pits or mud flows? Or is it that there was just one mud pit where countless dinosaurs all fell in, and all the fossils are from that one spot? But why are they spread out so widely? This suggests that these rapid burial events happened on a large scale. What exactly is going on? You can imagine it, right? And there's another very peculiar phenomenon with the dinosaur fossils we found so far. When dinosaurs died, they were all in the same posture. Yeah, this posture is with their heads and tails bent backward. So why would dinosaurs end up in this position when they died? Current research has found that this only happens when they drown. So what exactly caused so many dinosaurs to be drowned so quickly?
And they're so tall, plus they've got all that fat and meat.
Right. Some dinosaurs even lived in the water. Now, besides fossils as evidence, there's another piece of evidence, rock layers. I don't know if you've seen them before, but they're like this, layer upon layer stacked up, forming the underground part of the Earth. How are these layers formed? According to the original idea, it's like dust and sand gradually accumulating on the ground, year after year, over millions of years, possibly even tens of millions, eventually forming a layer of rock. And if you want to form rock layers as deep as the Earth's crust, how many billions of years would that take? But later, geologists discovered something. They found that, for example, after removing a layer, there are footprints on the rock layer. These footprints could be from some animals, or even dinosaur footprints. These footprints are actually very hard to preserve. For example, if you step on mud and leave a footprint, it might get smoothed out quickly by rain or wind, and then it's gone. So why are there footprints left on the rock layers? It means that another layer must have been rapidly deposited on top of it right away. It wasn't that the layers slowly, over many years, got covered up bit by bit through wind and sun. And they also found that all these animal tracks, across the whole United States, wherever there are animal footprints on these rock layers, they all point in the same direction. This shows that they were running away from something was chasing these animals, and they were all running in the same direction. Not bad. Later on, scientists also discovered that near the volcano crater, once a volcano erupts, it spews out a huge amount of mud, sand, and lava. This mud, sand, and lava quickly form a rock layer in the surrounding area. It could be 5 or 6 meters thick, and this layer might have formed in just one day. In other words, the formation of rock layers isn't as slow as we thought. It can actually happen very quickly. If something happens, 5 or 6 meters can just pile up in an instant. So if rock layers really do form this fast, then there's a problem. What we now see on Earth, like a rock layer several dozen meters thick that we previously estimated took tens of millions of years to form, might actually have formed in just a few years. That would mean the entire history of our Earth is much shorter. How do we currently determine that dinosaurs appeared 250 million years ago? It's because they are found in rock layers dated to 250 million years ago. But if those rock layers aren't actually from 250 million years ago, say they're from just 200,000 years ago, then it's really possible that dinosaurs lived at about the same time as humans. In our last video, we mentioned that the Andromedans said the earliest beings to come to Earth were called lizard people. These dinosaurs, they might actually be the lizard people. Dinosaurs looked like this, and according to current biological views, they couldn't run very fast. When we watched Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs run really fast, but in reality, they couldn't run at all. They were very, very slow. They couldn't run, and they couldn't fly either. With such short arms, they couldn't grab anything, so how did they become the rulers of Earth? It's very possible that they were actually those highly intelligent extraterrestrials. They were fascinating, and indeed, there was a symbiotic phase between them and humans. Everyone had to perform rituals to the heavens and offer people to the dinosaurs as food. Dinosaurs themselves couldn't catch these things, so how did they do it? They went extinct. Sigh, that's the Great Flood. In fact, what the Great Flood was meant to destroy were the lizard people, not humans as we know them today. According to those who believe in the new female star, the lizard people were actually imprisoned on Earth by a higher civilization, and it was this advanced civilization that unleashed the Great Flood. These gods weren't here to punish humanity, they were here to punish the lizard people. So, in a way, the dinosaurs were actually protecting humans. Right, and if this explanation doesn't make sense, there's another way to look at it. Dinosaurs and humans really didn't exist in the same era. Maybe it was just an earlier phase, then a great flood wiped them out, covered everything up in one go, the remains turned into fossils, and then humans were created afterward. And then life continued here. So actually, the Earth is like an experiment for aliens or gods. They just reset the surface of the planet, wiped everything out.
Formatted it.
Formatted it, yeah, exactly. I was trying to think of those 3 words but couldn't come up with them. Then it starts over again. Because this round of people, or whoever, think it's not working out, they just format it again and something else comes out. So this question, right now, is something that no scholar can explain. But those who support the Great Flood theory say, look, 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. Are you saying there isn't enough water on Earth to create a Great Flood? There's definitely enough. For example, due to the gravitational pull of other planets, like Nibiru or the strong gravity of the Moon, Earth's water could have been pulled up, sweeping across the entire planet. There's a similar scenario in the movie Interstellar, right? And as we mentioned in that film about Mars, based on the traces found on Mars now, it's suspected that there used to be a huge amount of water there. The width of those rivers is 100 times that of the Amazon, isn't it? Mars doesn't have a single drop of water now, yet we can still guess that it once had rivers 100 times wider than the Amazon. So, considering how much water Earth has now, it's entirely possible that there used to be even more. What we're talking about today is just one aspect of the Great Flood.
Just a part of the Great Flood.
We haven't even talked about the main flow of the Great Flood yet, which is actually quite
interesting. I haven't covered that part yet.